Welcome back. Or if this is your first video, I'd recommend starting with part 1 first. In that video, we covered the first 2 GenAI myths, both coming back to the same idea. GenAI is only as good as the knowledge you bring to it. In this video, we're going into the instruction itself, because that's where most students are actually losing ground. Let's get into myth 3. Myth 3. When GenAI fails to deliver, the AI is the problem. I've heard this a lot. ChatGPT is useless. Claude doesn't understand what I need. And I get it. The frustration is real. I've felt it myself. But frustration is a diagnostic signal, not a verdict. Here's what's almost certainly happening. I did exactly what your instruction asked. It just wasn't what you meant. And those are very different problems. The instruction is where the work happens. Fix that first. This is also the hidden failure of the how to prompt videos that flood YouTube. They teach you syntax, role setting, formatting, structure. What they can't teach you is domain-specific workflow logic. A genuinely effective instruction requires you to understand the logic and sequencing of your own work well enough to hand it to someone else. Think of GenAI as your assistant. If you want it to produce the work you need, you'll need to be able to explain your work clearly to it. And that's a much higher bar. In part 3 of this series, I'll show you what a developed instruction system actually looks like. What you'll see is a system built over several weeks of testing and refining, not typed in one sitting. That's the key distinction. A good GenAI instruction isn't a one-off query like you'd type into Google. It's a structure that evolves as you understand your own workflow better. One more thing to add. GenAI can actually help you write a good instruction for yourself, but only if you already understand what you're trying to do. The tool can scaffold the writing. Only you can provide the knowledge of your own process. So when output disappoints, try this before anything else. Ask GenAI to identify the gap between what your instruction asked for and what you actually wanted. Then ask it to help you revise the instruction accordingly. That's why a good instruction takes time to develop. Myth 4. Better prompts unlock better answers, regardless of what you know. This one is subtle, and it's probably the most important myth on the list for understanding why GenAI sometimes disappoints even when you think you've done everything right. Your instructions set a ceiling on what comes out. If your conceptual knowledge of a topic is shallow, your instructions will be shallow, and the output will be shallow too. The AI cannot produce insights that go beyond what you bring to the conversation. It mirrors your understanding back at you, amplified. This also explains why copying prompts from YouTube tutorials rarely works as well as advertised. That prompt was written by someone who knows their subject deeply. And GenAI filled in the gaps intelligently because the writer knew which gaps mattered. If you don't have that knowledge, the AI can't compensate. So before you ask GenAI anything, pause and ask yourself one question. Do I understand this topic well enough to recognize a wrong answer? If the honest answer is no, the work to do first is yours, not the AI's. This isn't a reason not to use GenAI. It's a reason to invest in your own understanding first, because that investment is exactly what makes GenAI useful. Myth 5, and this is the honest one. GenAI can handle every task if you give it the right prompt. It can't, and it's important to say that clearly, because overclaiming GenAI's ability doesn't help anyone. First, abstract tasks. When you ask GenAI to develop a theoretical contribution, or identify a gap in the literature, or generate an original argument, the output is generic. Not because the AI is broken, but because you haven't given it anything precise enough to act on. Abstract intellectual work has to start with you. Draft your own thinking first, even a rough half answer, and then ask GenAI to engage with it, push back on it, or help you develop it further. The MIT PhD student case mentioned in part 1 did exactly that. He used GenAI as a personal tutor, instructing it to push back, challenge his thinking, and test whether he had genuinely understood. The output from that kind of conversation will be substantially better. But here's something I want told from my own experience, and most GenAI videos won't tell you this. Even mechanical tasks have genuine limits. I have encountered situations where I've tweaked an instruction several times, and the output still isn't right. At that point, the honest call is to stop. Know when to stop, and do it yourself. It will be quicker, the result will be better, and recognizing that moment is good judgment, not a failure of prompting. GenAI operates within built-in guidelines that your instructions cannot always override. Even a clearly specified, well-constructed instruction can hit a wall that has nothing to do with how well you've written it. Work with that honestly, rather than spending an hour trying to prompt your way past a constraint that isn't going to move. Let's bring these 5 myths together and leave you with something to act on. First, your instructions are your knowledge in action. The ceiling on what GenAI produces is set by what you know and can articulate. That's the foundational principle underneath everything else we've covered today. Invest in your own understanding first, because without it, no prompt in the world will make GenAI useful to you. GenAI can extend your thinking. It cannot originate it. Second, direct GenAI and always evaluate what it gives you. You are the one in charge of this conversation, not the tool. Decide what to ask, how to frame it, and where to push. And always evaluate what comes back. Why does this matter? Because GenAI hallucinates. It produces incorrect information, fabricated references, misattributed findings, plausible-sounding claims that simply aren't true, with exactly the same confident tone it uses when it's right. It doesn't flag its own errors. That's not a bug that will be fixed in the next version. It's a fundamental feature of how language models work. The only defense against it is your own knowledge base. If you know the field, you'll catch it. If you don't, you won't. That's another reason building your knowledge base isn't optional. It's what makes you a reliable judge of what GenAI gives you. Third, read the literature yourself. Summaries miss the nuance where original ideas are born. Use GenAI to organize and connect what you've already read, not to replace the act of reading. The reading is where your knowledge base gets built. That base is what everything else depends on. Fourth, when output fails, audit your instruction first. Ask GenAI to identify the gap between what your instruction asked for and what you actually wanted. You'll often see it immediately. The instruction is where the work happens, and fixing it is almost always more productive than blaming the model. And fifth, know when to stop and do it yourself. When repeated tweaks on any task aren't delivering, stop. Do it yourself. That's not a failure of prompting. That's good judgment. That wraps up our session on 5 GenAI myths every university student believes. Remember, GenAI can amplify your knowledge, but it cannot create it. Build the base first, and when you do, GenAI becomes one of the most powerful research tools you'll ever have. Keep building, and I'll see you soon.